Adisa Kanu had always been a man of reason, focused and dedicated to his work as a personal injury lawyer in Lagos, Nigeria. But his world changed the day he met Amina. From the moment she walked into his office, Adisa was captivated. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was something else about her, an enigmatic aura that drew him in deeper with every word she spoke. She seemed like a woman from another world, as though she didn't entirely belong in this reality. Their connection was immediate, and soon their relationship blossomed. Within months, they were married in a traditional Yoruba ceremony. Amina's vows were soft yet strange. "I will never leave you, Adisa. Not in this life. Not in the next." The words sent a chill down Adisa's spine, though he smiled through the ceremony, dismissing his unease as mere wedding jitters. Their new life together felt perfect, but shadows loomed on the horizon. After the honeymoon, Adisa and Amina moved to a quiet village on the outskirts of Ibadan, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. They settled into a modest home surrounded by thick, ancient trees, where the sounds of nature were their only neighbors. The villagers, though welcoming, always cast cautious glances at Amina. Their whispers carried rumors, but Adisa ignored them. He loved his wife. Their first months together were blissful, but as time passed, strange things began to happen. Adisa would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone was watching them. The air in the house felt heavy, as though it was thick with something unseen. But Amina remained calm, almost too calm, as if the disturbances didn't touch her. Adisa couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself harbored secrets that whispered at the edge of his consciousness. One evening, Adisa stayed late at the office, finishing up a case. He called Amina to let her know he was coming home, but for the first time since their marriage, she didn't pick up. It was unlike her. His heart thudded in his chest as he dialed again. Still no answer. By the time Adisa drove the winding roads back to their secluded house, the unease in his stomach had turned into full-blown fear. When he arrived, the front door stood ajar, swaying slightly in the night breeze. Something was wrong. He stepped inside cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the stillness of the house. "Amina," he called, but there was no reply. The air was thick with tension. In the kitchen, the scene was chaos, plates shattered on the floor, a pot of stew burning on the stove. He turned it off, his mind racing. The house was eerily quiet, as if it was holding its breath. Grabbing a wooden pestle from the kitchen, he ventured deeper into the house, determined to find his wife. Adisa's search ended in the bedroom, where his worst fears were realized. Amina lay crumpled on the floor, her clothes torn, her face swollen and bruised. Blood trickled from her lip, and her eyes fluttered open as he rushed to her side. "Amina, what happened?" His voice trembled with a mixture of panic and rage. "A man," she whispered, her breath labored. "He broke in. I fought him, but he was too strong. He kept hitting me." The room spun as Adisa's blood boiled with fury. His mind was a storm of anger and helplessness. He had sworn to protect her, but he had failed. Cradling Amina in his arms, he carried her to the car. They needed to get to the hospital in Ibadan, but as they sped down the deserted road, Amina suddenly sat up, her eyes wide with terror. "There!" Amina screamed, pointing out of the window. "That's him. That's the man." Adisa slammed on the brakes, his eyes following her finger. A man was walking casually along the side of the road, under the dim streetlights. "Are you sure?" he asked, though the rage building inside him made him trust her instinct without question. "That's him," Amina whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sure." Adisa's pulse raced. He pulled the car over, grabbing the wooden pestle as he got out. Without thinking, he followed the man down a narrow, dark alleyway that led toward an old abandoned marketplace. The man walked as though he had no fear, unaware of the fury that trailed him. Adisa's grip on the pestle tightened. The alley was dark and suffocating, but Adisa could only hear his own breath and the sound of his pounding heart. He caught up to the man, raised the pestle, and brought it down with a force he didn't know he possessed. The man crumpled to the ground, motionless. It was over in seconds. As Adisa stood over the body, panting, the alley seemed to close in around him, darker than before. For a moment, he thought he saw shadows moving along the walls. When Adisa returned to the car, Amina seemed calm, too calm. She didn't ask what had happened, and Adisa didn't tell her. They drove in silence to the hospital in Ibadan. His mind raced, unsure of what he had just done or why it had felt so necessary. He had killed a man, yet it didn't feel like justice. It felt like something had taken control of him, something he couldn't understand. At the hospital, as they approached the emergency room, Amina froze. Her eyes locked onto the doctor coming toward them, wide with fear. "That's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's the man who attacked me." Adisa looked at the doctor, then at Amina. "What are you saying?" Amina's gaze darted to a nurse walking by. "That's him too. They're all him." Her voice cracked with hysteria. Adisa stared at her, dread building in his gut. What was happening? Over the next few days, Amina's paranoia grew worse. She began to see her attacker everywhere, in the market, on the television, even in the faces of strangers on the street. Each time she pointed someone out, Adisa would follow her gaze, but he never saw anything out of the ordinary. Yet, the fear in Amina's eyes was real, too real to ignore. Adisa tried to comfort her, to reassure her that it was just her trauma playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, he began to feel it too, the sense that the world around them was slowly warping, twisting into something sinister. The house, once their refuge, now felt like a prison, its walls alive with whispers. The shadows moved on their own, flickering and growing longer with each passing night. One night, Adisa woke up to find Amina gone. Panic surged through him as he rushed through the house, calling her name. He found her in the backyard, standing under an ancient baobab tree, her back to him, staring into the dark forest. "Amina," he called, his voice shaky. She turned slowly, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. "He's here," she whispered. "He never left." Adisa's skin prickled with cold. As he stood beside her, he felt it too, a presence, something dark and malevolent, lurking just beyond their sight. The air around them grew thick and suffocating, as if the very night was alive. Amina pointed to the edge of the forest, her finger trembling. "He's watching us." In a desperate attempt to escape the growing madness, Adisa returned to the alley where he had killed the man. His heart pounded as he ventured deeper into the dark, narrow passage. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting into unnatural shapes. As he reached the spot where the body had fallen, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was the man he had killed, but his face was shifting, warping into the faces of the doctor, the nurse, the strangers Amina had pointed out. They were all the same. And yet, they were none of them. Adisa dropped the pencil in horror as the figure spoke, its voice low and guttural. You cannot escape us, Adisa. She belongs to us now. Back at the house, Adisa confronted Amina. What are you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Amina's eyes filled with tears, but there was something in them, something ancient and dark. I warned you, she said softly. I told you I would never leave. Not in this life. Not in the next. The shadows in the room seemed to thicken, closing in around them. Amina's form began to shift, her face becoming a blur of the many faces Adisa had seen. The entity that had been stalking them was not outside, it had been within Amina all along. And now, it had come to claim them both. As the darkness enveloped him, Adisa realized too late that his love for Amina had bound him to a curse far older than either of them. A curse from which there was no escape. Please subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories.